Okay, I would suggest that we continue, right? In the next, I would suggest half an hour, something like this. We are going to repeat what we have done so far. So we are going to create a new ASP.NET Core project with Entity Framework. This will be not new. The next half an hour is just training. It's with coding, it's exactly the same as with sports. If you want to get good with something, let's say running or biking or whatever, you have to do it over and over and over again. So the next half an hour is not learning something new, it's practicing existing stuff so that you don't have to practice at home and you will get a great grade for your next exam, okay? So please follow along and on your machine create a folder wherever you want to create this folder. Let me quickly see if I still share my screen. Yes, my screen is still shared, so everything is fine. Please create a new folder. Let's call it, I will call it OData sample, something like this. And then fire up Visual Studio 2019. I really ask you to follow along. So this is not wasted time. This is time that you will have available at home because you don't need to practice at home. So it's really useful to follow along. I will record it still, although it's a repetition. It's a good repetition. Create new project, please. Create new project in Visual Studio 2019. Until the next exam, we will stick with .NET 5. I know that in the meantime, .NET 6 Preview 2 has already become available. After the exam that is coming up after the Easter holiday, we will switch to newer versions. You know, I'm a big fan of using always the latest and greatest stuff, but I don't want to overwhelm you with another beta version just in front of the exam. So don't be angry with me, we'll just stay with .NET 5. Okay, let's look for an ASP.NET Core Web API. ASP.NET Core Web API. We have done that multiple times. And then I will put it into my folder that I have created just now. What will be the project name? Let's call the project orders, or OData orders. Something like this. I will give you a sec to set up this project. If I'm too fast, if anybody cannot follow along, please let me know, okay? We're going to use .NET 5. We don't need authentication. We have done that in the last few weeks. Not our topic today. And we do not need Open API for this exercise. Let's clean up the solution because Visual Studio has added a bunch of demo data that we don't need. So here, this weather forecast stuff, just delete it, we don't need it. And in the controllers folder, the weather forecast controller, just delete it, we don't need it. And then we have an empty ASP.NET Core 5 Web API. Good. Let's add Entity Framework. Who can tell me that's not an exam situation? I just ask you to try to get into the example. What NuGet packages do we need to install in order to use ASP.NET Core with Entity Framework 5? Exactly, here it is. Microsoft Entity Framework Core SQL Server. That's the first one that we install. Correct. Please do so. And what is the second NuGet package that we need to install in order to work with Entity Framework in the way we did? Remember, design, exactly. How did you find it out?
I just typed in Microsoft.entity and I saw it and I just remembered. So.
Ah, you remembered? Okay, okay. Entity Framework, and then we have the design NuGet package, exactly. But remember, in my course material, you have on the slides this Entity Framework cheat sheet. You used it in the last exam, and you of course can use it in the next exam too. Right? So the cheat sheet is still valuable. And in this cheat sheet, you will find the NuGet packages. Here you see that you have to install. Just to remember, we had this cheat sheet. I know you have so many courses in parallel with so many different technologies. So it sometimes is hard to remember how did we do that a few weeks ago. Remember the cheat sheet, okay? Good. Accept everything, install the design package, and we are good. Now we have NuGet. Good. Let's add the data model. Can you remember? We need to do 3 things when we add entity framework to an ASP.NET Core application. We need to create the entity model, we need to create the data context, and we need to register the data context with dependency injection. These are the 3 steps. All 3 steps are part of the cheat sheet, and we will quickly recap that in this lesson. So, I would suggest adding a new folder. Right-click on the project, add new folder, and let's call it data. Very generic data. This is where all the stuff related to data, databases, entity framework lives. Create a folder, data. Inside of data, let's do something very simple. Let's add a class, right-click on the folder, add class, and let's call it customer, okay? Let's do something boring, but still very useful. Then we have, as you can see it here, our customer file inside of our data folder. Can you remember what is the suggested name for the primary key? ID? Exactly. Let's call it ID. Every customer has an ID. And then we might add, for instance, the customer name. And then we might add to have something to query with the country ID. Okay? Let's add these 3 properties. Is that okay for you? Make sense? Nothing complicated. I think you get the idea. Got it? Nice. Let's add a second class here. Right-click on data, add new class. Let's call it order. And let's keep this really simple. Again, primary key. You told me ID, order ID. Yeah, call it order ID. Did I call it just ID here?
Yeah.
So let's call this one ID here. That's fine. What else do we do? Let's say a date time, order date. Yeah, question.
Would the ID still be auto-generated value if we put customer ID?
Yes.
Or the ID?
But if you add foo ID, then it will not be a primary key and it will not be auto-generated.
Okay, so the class name and ID?
Yes,
okay.
yes. So the order has an ID, then we have the order date, then let's say directly here we have the product. Let's say an order can just be a single product. Let's put the quantity here, and let's use, let's make it simple with integer and just call it revenue. German Umsatz. Okay? Very simple. Order date, product, quantity, revenue. Just one thing is missing. Every order must have one and exactly one customer. What do I have to add to the order class in order to model a foreign key to the customer table? Yeah?
The property with customer as a type and...
Correct. Good. Anything else? What we could do, optionally, we could also add the foreign key value by using customer ID. Can you remember this pattern? Customer with the customer type, and a second one with the foreign key. That will be the foreign key column in the database. Good. Nice. And of course we can do the same on the other side too. In the customer table, we can specify that we have a larger number of orders, more than one order. Therefore, we need to add a property list of orders. Okay? This is the n side of the relation. Every order has one and exactly one customer. Every customer has n orders. Can you remember? I know it has been a while that we created a brand new entity framework application, so this is why we are repeating that. And with that, I'm pretty happy. Next one, after we created the model, we will now add the data context. So please add another class. Let's call that the OData orders context. OData orders context, because our project is called OData orders and we are building an entity framework data context. So why not calling it OData orders context? Let me quickly remind you how to build an OData context. If I scroll down a little bit, then you will see here in the cheat sheet a nice little template that you can use when you have to build the exam. The base class is the DB context. So let's add the base class. In our code, DB context. Right? Base class, DB context. Just like in the cheat sheet. It should just be available because we already added the NuGet package. Second, we have to add a constructor. Here you see the constructor. It gets a parameter of type DB context options. Use the cheat sheet in order to recap what we have to do. So in my case, I will do a constructor CTOR, and it will get a parameter of type DB context options. And the parameter here is the OData orders context. Let's call this one context, and let's call base with context. So let me show you the whole code. This is the correct constructor. Do I know that by heart? Probably not, because I have the cheat sheet or the documentation. I will just look it up and write it down. So this is definitely an information that you should have available when doing the exam, and it will be an information that you should have available when you do the Matura. When you have the constructor, you have to add two properties, one for each table, and the data type, if you look it up in the cheat sheet, is dbSet. dbSet of customers, and dbSet of orders. These two properties will make our tables available in Entity Framework, and these two properties will make sure that the proper tables are created in the database. This will become the table name. Next step, nearly the last step, in the startup method, we have to add something to the configure services method. Please remember, we have this dependency injection topic. We talked about dependency injection. We need to add the database context to dependency injection. Do you need that to know that by heart? No, you don't, because you have the cheat sheet available. Here it is. And essentially what you can do is you can just copy out this line from the cheat sheet. That's exactly what you need to do. Okay? Services dot blah blah blah. I will just copy it out and put it exactly here. The only thing that we need to change is first the name of the data context. It's called OData orders context. Then we need to add this using statement. We have this nice little light bulb here. It helps us to add the using statement. And as you can see, configuration is written with an uppercase C in our case. So we have to change that from a lowercase c to an uppercase C. And we are done. Just this one line. And Entity Framework is available in our ASP.NET Core application. There is one final step missing. Does anybody know what the last step is that we need to do? Yes?
The connection string in app settings.
Exactly that one. The connection string, this one, has to be added to our settings file. We have this app settings file here, and as you can see, no connection string yet. We have been using localDB for this semester, and we will use localDB again here. So let's jump into the cheat sheet, scroll a little bit up, and if you take a close look, you will find a chapter here, connection string in app settings JSON, and we can just copy this one out. Oops, sorry. Copy this one out from the cheat sheet. So let's get that one, this one, and let's add it here, and we are good. Please take close attention. Please take a look at my screen for a second. Do not ignore that. Can I draw today? That the connections, that the app settings file has to start with these curly braces, and the connection string must be a child of the top level curly braces. So if you take a look here, I left this one and I added the connection string as a child. The other settings, which were already in this file, I left them unchanged. So that would be a mistake. That would not be okay, because we don't have a top level curly brace here. We need to have this top level curly brace because this is a JSON file, and in JSON, JavaScript object notation, the top level must be either a primary data type like a string or number, or an object, this is an object, or an array. We don't need an array. Good. Now let's change the connection string. I will simply change the database name. I will call it OData orders, something like this. Choose any database name. And with that, we should be good. Now, can anybody remember what we have to do in order to create the database? 2 steps. At migrations, I like that one. You have 2 possibilities. Either you open a Windows terminal, navigate into the folder, or if you are already in Visual Studio, I don't know the shortcut by heart. I just used the search bar. Ctrl-Ö is the correct shortcut for Visual Studio Code. So what I did here, up here, I just typed in terminal. See that one? View terminal. Let's look up the shortcut. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it?
I think it's Ctrl-A from here.
Does it work on your computer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Developer partial, right?
It should be the developer PowerShell. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
So you have the right keyboard binding. On my computer something changed. I don't know why. But then I remembered it correctly. On my computer it's different, but it doesn't matter. So down here we can create the migrations. Do we have to know that by heart? Of course not. Cheat sheet documentation. It happens that I know it by heart. It's .NET EF migrations add, and then you just add the name of the migration. And I will just call it initial for initial migration, first migration. Press enter. And I think I now know what happened. I installed the newest preview on my computer and some things seem to have disappeared. If you get this mistake that the specified command was not found, go to the top of your cheat sheet, because probably you need to do, just like I do, install the .NET EF global tool. For whatever reason it disappeared, I don't know why. Let's reinstall it, no problem. And then adding the migrations should hopefully work. Let's see if I screwed up or if it works. Nice, build succeeded. Done. As you can see, we have the migrations. Does anybody in distance learning have any problems? No? Good. In the class, all problems are solved. We are good. The last step that we need to do is to create the database. Let's do that. .NET EF database update. And if the demo gods are smiling, the database is going to be created, and we are, come on, good, done. Did it work? Did you get the database? Fine? Awesome. Good. So, the goal was, I promised you, that we are going to use half an hour to quickly recap how we create a new ASP.NET Core app with Entity Framework built in. Now it's 9:50, so we used 35 minutes, so we are just in time. We are good here. Okay? Now we have a ready-made Entity Framework project, and we can now start to experiment with OData. But I think we have the big break now, right?